The place that yogis fear. Now, when most people talk about enlightenment, they tend to reference a place full of light or a place of complete unity. Okay, fair enough. But in actuality, there is a stage beyond this. Now, on the way up the path of enlightenment, most people report increasing amounts of light, or something that seems like light, after they pass that period of the void, which can be a little confusing. Now, in going up this path of enlightenment, many will describe feelings of bliss that eventually dribble away into complete awareness, or a total immersion into their environment, or a complete belonging with other things. Okay, fair enough. As this continues to intensify, you will wind up in a place where you've lost consciousness of your body and you only have awareness of undifferentiated light. All right. But where does this light come from? Now, as you know, in the 60 skills curriculum, we tend to describe things in terms of mechanics. We're not terribly concerned with the philosophy. We're more concerned with, well, how you get there. So, how does this work? Well, on a very basic level, if you're going up the path of enlightenment, what you're doing is you're taking all of these discrete little pieces of reality and you're putting them back together again. Now, techniques like establishing equilibrium and the releasing techniques allow you to essentially get rid of the mental hang-ups, if you will, that result in a kind of attachment that makes this difficult. But ultimately what we're doing is we're taking all these individual pieces of reality, putting them together, and then unifying them. The result of which is all of the energy, if you will, or mind, or other things associated with terrestrial reality start to add up. And the further and further you go up this path, and the more of these things you recombine, you end up generating a large amount of light. So that light of enlightenment, pun intended, is many ways just the reflection of all of the things in creation off of something that's not creation. And this gets to the topic of today's discussion, or in other words, that place that yogis fear. Now, what is this exactly? To be blunt, this is something that the sages and the saints have argued about quite a bit. Whatever it is seems to be really important. Whatever goes on there is likewise impossible to describe because human beings describe things in terms of their physicality, sensation, energy, emotion, physical constraint, things like this. So by definition, if you were somehow possible to go to a place beyond this, we'd have a really hard time describing it. But what's this whole thing about yogis and fear? I thought, as many of us do, that the whole point in being a yogi is to kind of get beyond that. Ultimately it is, but here's the curious part. When you've projected your consciousness all the way up into this complete, undifferentiated light, it feels almost complete. It feels like you're there, but not quite. Beyond this, you'll perceive this kind of barrier of nothingness. Now, this isn't the void that most people describe. That actually happens much earlier in the process, and you have to get beyond that to go to this recombining stage, basically. But whatever this thing is that lies beyond that state of complete light, it's a little disturbing. Most people will report encountering an entity, maybe they frame it as their own mind, telling them that they're not ready, acting as some kind of barrier to skipping over to the end. That said, I'm not sure the entity exists. This entity will tell you things like you have too much attachment, or you're not physically ready, or you care too much about the phenomenal world, or so on and so on and so on. And these descriptions of how you're not ready will usually be accompanied by some pretty disturbing imagery from your own past. So it's giving you this idea that, quite simply, you can't go there yet. Now, that said, in reality, I suspect this isn't true. This is kind of the final obstacle before essentially getting over yourself. Because here's the thing. When you go to that next place, when you go to that whatever it is, the great nothingness, on a certain level you die. In fact, physically what I found when I go through this, I'll feel a heaviness in my chest, all of these other signs of something that would be the sign of an impending heart attack, for example. And my suspicion is that when I do project into this place, my heart stops for a second. Now, I seem to come back, so it doesn't seem to kill me permanently. But on a certain level, going to that place, beyond this unification of energy, beyond what our senses normally use to describe the world around us, is a lot like dying. And dying, for those of you who haven't had the dubious pleasure of dying and coming back a few times, is pretty disturbing. Your body really doesn't like this, your mind gets freaked out by it, and your emotions get all kinds of out of sorts. But again, if you're placing your consciousness in a place beyond conventional perception, well, that would kind of be like dying. Now, what's interesting about this is when it happens, it seems to be terribly important. Something seems to happen there that changes you when you come back. Because now all of this light that you've been accumulating around you has gone into the other place, or neutralized out, or I'm not sure what it is, but it's pretty important. And this gets back to a truism that we've talked about a lot in the 60 Skills curriculum, where the true sages, the true yogis who've gone the distance, all admit that this thing, whatever it is, this final barrier to enlightenment and what lies beyond it, can only be described in the negative. You can't really positively describe it. They'll describe it in terms of it's not this, it's not that, it's not energy, it's not bliss, it's not something, it's something else. And that's as clear a description of that as I can give you. Now, for those who've been following the channel for some time now, you'll know that a major part of my effort over the last several years has been decoding the mandala, or the sacred symbol, on the cover of Franz Barden's third book, The Key to the True Kabbalah. Based off experiences in our test group, apparently we have done this. So, by following the complete curriculum, you can get to this point of unified light and beyond it. It's a lot like dying, but somehow we keep coming back. Now, I'll have a description of what this goes on in later videos, but suffice it to say, the state of Kether that gets described in a lot of traditional Hermetic and Jewish Kabbalah sources seems to be pretty damn accurate. So that is, in complete terms, that place that yogis fear. So, if you like the topic of today's discussion, please hit the like button down below and perhaps subscribe to the channel. And if you'd like to know more about what's going on in the 60 Skills world, come check out 60skills.com or head on over to Perseus Arcane Academy. Otherwise, as per usual, train hard and be well.